What's your name?
Tony Gwynn Jr.
How many years you play professional baseball?
15.
What's your current job?
Man, I got a bunch of hats. Broadcaster, analyst. We'll just leave it there. I guess TV host.
If you had to take a guess of how many times in your life you've gone through a day in which nobody asked you about your dad or mentioned your dad at all, what would be the number of times?
Throughout my life?
Yeah, throughout your entire life.
I'd probably say about 1,000.
About 1,000. And how many days how old are you?
I can tell you I'm 37 years of age.
Coming up on this edition of Life Around the Seams, our guest is Tony Gwynn Jr. We will talk about what it's like growing up, the son of perhaps the greatest hitter of this generation, but also about his life, carving out a playing career within that shadow, how he honors his father to this day, and his life after baseball ended. Tony Gwynn Jr. next. This is Life Around the Seams.
Former Major League pitcher Jim Bouton once wrote, "You spend a good piece of your life gripping a baseball, and in the end, it turns out it was the other way around all the time." Welcome to Life Around the Seams, a podcast about baseball people who have interesting stories from between the lines, and sometimes even more interesting stories outside the lines. Here's your host, Josh Sushan.
Hi, Tony. Thanks so much for joining me. This is awesome.
No problem.
I'm definitely going to be that guy who talks about your dad, but I'm not going to only talk about your dad.
All good. I'm used to it.
But he was the first major leaguer who I interviewed. And because of that, I just thought it was going to be easy.
Yeah, you're not the first person to tell me that.
I was at the Daily Aztec, and he treated me like I was at the New York Times.
I mean, that's kind of how my dad treated everybody. I think he had this unique ability to make you feel as though you've known him for years, as if you grew up as childhood friends. That's how he was really with everybody.
Yeah, very special. So when I started this podcast, I didn't plan on making so much of it about fathers and sons, but as I look back at the different guests that I had Reed Ryan last year during the baseball winter meetings, and obviously we talked about Nolan, Chris and Pat Vallejo, and we talked about their dad and their brothers, and Brian Holman, major league pitcher, his son David pitched for the Isotopes, and I just realized just how much fathers and sons, it just became natural that this podcast has turned into a lot of father-son talk. So I'm glad that I can continue this with you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty about baseball, is that for generations and generations and generations, it's been fathers teaching their sons a game that is special to them. And it's transferred, obviously, through different generations, whether it's the Boones, whether it's the Griffeys, whether it's the Bonds. I mean, the list is really, really long in the game of baseball because it's a shared sport it has been a shared sport through history of a father-son. And I think that's why you see so many kids, whether they were former players or not, end up playing this sport.
Yeah. And even for those of us whose dads did not reach the major leagues, it's still
it's a love for the game. Yeah.
All right. You were born in October of '82.
Yep.
Your dad made his major league debut in June of '82. How old were you? Do you recall when you could comprehend that my dad's different than most dads?
1989 is the first. I was 7. First time I could start to realize my dad was a little different. Like, go to school, people are talking about the Padre game, and they're talking about your dad. And, prior to that age, it just was going over my head. But that year, he happened to be going up against Will Clark to, the last day of the season for a batting title. And that conversation, those conversations that would happen at school is what kind of opened my eyes to, okay, maybe not everybody's dads, are doing this, right? So, I'd say about 89 is when it started to kind of hit me. Like, because he ended up winning on the very last at bat, infield single. I just remember leaving the stadium that day and how many people were just so excited. They didn't win a pennant. Giants were the ones going on to the playoffs, but there was just a different feel about it that day.
I think people who just heard you laugh realized you have the exact same laugh as your dad.
I've literally heard that. I've been here. Yesterday was my first day here. I've probably heard it at least 12 times yesterday.
Okay, so your dad was naturally chatty. You are now naturally chatty. We'll find out when that began, but let's go back further. For your grandparents, does the entire Gwynn family have just this outgoing, great belly laugh and personality, or where did your dad get it?
I think it was from his mother, Vendella. She was very much bubbly like that, more so than his father, Charles, was. I think that's where he is. But to be honest, I think really him and his brother Chris, really all three of them are unique to that. I don't necessarily believe either of their parents were as bubbly as they are, but especially Chris and my father were like that. And you don't know how many times people thought my dad was from the South because of how he had this kind of like tang to his talk, along with that laugh. So I think honestly, when you boil it down, it probably is a unique thing to him and his brother.
Yeah. Whenever you'd go to the ballpark with your dad, who were the other kids that were around the ballpark that would hang out, and what would you guys do?
Early, it was the Templetons, Gary II and Jerome. They were there. The Bochis were there early on. Pip Roberts, his son, was there. So it evolved over time, I went from being...
Your dad was there 2 decades.
He was there for a long time, right? So there were a bunch of different kids that came, and for a long time I just mixed in, and eventually I was like the oldest one remaining. So I went through 2 different Bochis, Greg, the older son, and then Brett, the younger son, who was younger than I was. It kind of cycled through. The Hoffmans, they were little guys when I was, around. And then as I left and went off to college, they became those kids. That's kind of how the cycle goes.
Yeah. How much interaction did you have with the San Diego chicken?
I had one very specific encounter. My sister and I, they do a routine where they bring the little chicks on, and they pee on the umpire. I was one of those chicks one day. So it was myself, my sister, and then maybe 2 other kids, and we're on the backside of home plate. So we're doing our little routine, and I remember because my sister picked up the wrong leg, and it was my mom and dad laughed really hard at that for months.
I don't know how that would play nowadays, having kids pee on umpires, but it was my favorite part of watching.
They actually redid it last year. The chicken had his. It was either last year or the year before. It was the longest anniversary. One of the anniversaries he was here. He came and they had the kids do that exact routine.
I take it your parents were watching?
Well, my dad was on the field.
Yeah.
He was watching.
Yeah.
My mom. They had set it up so they made sure they were in their seats when it happened for sure.
Let's talk about your mom. Because anytime there's a player who's a son of a major leaguer, it's fun. He goes to the ballpark and hangs out. But dad's gone at spring training. Mom's a single mom for a lot.
Yeah.
Tell me about your mom and how she held the family together when dad's away at work.
I think if my dad was here, he'd tell you that his success can't happen without her. She was selfless from the standpoint is whatever her dreams and aspirations were, aside from being a mother and a wife, she was willing to put those aside so that my dad could be at the yard at 12:30, 1 o'clock at a 7 o'clock game and really have a one-track mind in terms of his focus in the game of baseball. And that's what my dad, although he was a great athlete, he outworked a lot of people. He had unbelievable hand-eye coordination, but it was the time he put in, and my mom allowed for him to do that without any, reservation of leaving his kids behind. He was allowed to do that, and, the same goes for in terms of having to raise us, because as you said, baseball wives who have children basically become mom and dad for a significant part of the year. 6 months, 7 months if you're counting spring training, they're gone. In spring training, there is no coming back. Like there, you leave from San Diego, and he's there. And now, as my dad got older, he would randomly drive back. But early on, that wasn't the case. He was there for a month. We get a chance to go out and visit him for spring break, maybe if we're lucky, and see him then. But yeah, my mom is one of the strongest individuals I know.
By the way, Tony and I are recording this podcast outdoors on a deck. We got the Coronado Bridge to one side. We got the bay around, but every once in a while a helicopter might fly by. But that's okay. We're in San Diego, so it's all good. The other thing that I remember reading about when I was a kid, and I wonder how much memory you have of this, is that, I mean, your dad was always the big proponent of video early. And like VHS, right? So was your mom like pressing record at home while the team's on the road and like the video editor, basically?
Yeah, I mean, well, at first there was no video editor. I mean, my mom was the video editor. She would hit record. This is back in, I think, Betamax tapes, right? Mm-hmm. So no team has their own video. Like, you just show up, play the game, go home, right? So my mom was that. He was struggling one year, and he just like, I need you to just record. I need to see what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So she would record, and at the time it was just record the whole game. Now, as time went on, it got more sophisticated. Just record the at-bat, turn the recorder off, things of that nature. But, yeah, my mom was his video, the video editor. She was the BP thrower. I mean, my mom was...
She threw BP?
She threw BP to him, yeah, during the off-season, for sure.
You got a scouting report on your mom's BP? Like, good 2 seamers? Or
apparently it was good enough for him to get the work in he needed, so... You know, but yeah, like I said, my mom wore multiple hats.
I love it. That's awesome. I was on YouTube the other day, and there was a story. I think you were about 10 years old, and the story was about you. And at one point, you're like laying down on the ground, and your dad says, "Come on, come over here."
Oh, this is at Qualcomm.
Yeah, you got to do an interview. And you're like, your dad's like, "You got to be a well-rounded ball player. You got to learn how to do your interviews."
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that was somebody actually sent me that interview not too long ago. That's how I knew what you were talking about. Yeah, I mean, my dad, it was funny. When he taught lessons like that, it was never like direct. Like, it was kind of like on a whim, and those things stick out to me. Like, I remember laying on the ground like, I'm not really ready to do nothing like this yet. Why are you doing this? But I ended up doing it, and I mean, at that point is when I started to realize, even before, because even at this point, I didn't know I wanted to play baseball when I grew up. I liked the game a lot, and I enjoyed being around these big leaguers. But at, I think 10 or what was it, 12, you said?
Yes.
I don't know if I was really thinking that far ahead, if I could see it that far ahead. But I realized, though, at that point that this was going to be a necessary evil at some point. That I would need to be comfortable.
At the same time, how often at the end of the game you just want to go home and your dad's doing yet another interview, and here's one more question from some reporter, because all the reporters loved him because he was such a great interview. How often you were like, okay, can we go home now?
There was times, but it was few because, like I said, because I was around it at an early age, I think I just had an understanding that this is who he was. This is, what he had to do. Now, don't get me wrong. There was many days where my dad was like, I'm done today, guys. I'm going home. Yeah. Like, he'd be in a bad mood, wanted to go, just like everybody. But for more than others, a lot more than others, he sat in front of his locker and knew that was he knew that was something he had to do. It was just like having to go work on your game. He knew at the end of all this was done, I had to ask some questions.
Yeah. When I talked to Reed Ryan last year, I remember asking him about when he started playing youth baseball and how he was treated on the field, and he told me that all the other players are great, but it was the parents. He said, like, he got heckled by parents more than anyone else, and that blew my mind. And I'm wondering what kind of experience you had with people expecting you to be something.
You know what? To be honest, Josh, I could have been just totally oblivious to it. I do remember as a 9-year-old, playing with 11 and 12-year-olds, first time stepping out on the field, being told that, not being told, but having a coach assume that I was just going to go out and hit baseballs like my dad was, like at 9. And it didn't bother me. It didn't make me feel any way. It was just like, okay, this is my name is the same. My dad's really good. This is what it's going to be. So it's one of those things I just embraced at an early age. Yeah, I was heckled, but I always embraced that. Like, especially as I got older, I felt really good about giving it back because I knew I could. I was good enough, especially in high school, college, when that's really going on. Even at the minor league level, I knew I could give it back, and I'd be all right.
And there's a famous time in Denver that we're going to get to later, which is like the greatest video of all time. We're going to save that. So when you're in high school, you ended up going to San Diego State, just like your dad, just like your uncle. Was there ever a doubt, or was there any other options, any other thought about going somewhere else?
In terms of San Diego State?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was committed to go to Cal State Fullerton.
Really?
Yeah. I was committed. I sent my letter of intent, and this was in 2000, beginning of 2000. So I probably committed in like March. This is also 2000 is the second to last season my dad would play. And Coach Dietz, who was the head coach at San Diego State at the time, had told him many times before, but as of around that time, that I'm holding on to this job for you. When you're ready to retire, it's yours. Now, my dad didn't know in 2000 how sure he wanted to retire. I mean, something he'd been doing is for all of his adult life. I think it took him the rest of 2000 into the 2001 season, because he didn't announce that he's retiring until the season got going. And I remember him coming into my room. At this point, it's probably before summer starts of 2000. And he's like, Coach Dietz is holding on to this job for me. And I'm thinking, I don't have much time left to play. I know that. But I'm really considering it. And I don't even know if we had a conversation about him coaching me playing for him, but I think I thought about it immediately. And what ended up happening was Coach Horton, who is at Oregon now, he was the head coach at Cal State Fullerton. It took me about 2 weeks. I thought about it, and at the end of the day, it was like, man, how cool would it be to be able to play for my dad? I've never been able to spend that kind of time with him in a calendar year, because usually I'm in school, he's gone playing baseball, whatever it is. It just got to the point where I was like, I think this is something I would love to do. So I got on the phone. I built up the courage to call. I'm 17 at this time. Like,
you take notes. Okay, these are my bullet points.
Having like a real conversation about changing my mind. It's tough for a 17-year-old, but I got on the phone. And Coach Horton was so gracious. I mean, he understood what I was getting at, and he basically was like, hey, I totally get it. If it doesn't work out, it's an open door. So that just made it easy for me to make the transition. Now, because I ended up switching and I had already turned down San Diego State earlier, my scholarship was a lot smaller by the time I came back around. But nevertheless, that's how I ended up there.
So your freshman year was your dad's, was that the transition year? Didn't he have like a transition year with Dietz?
He was finishing, so my freshman year, so I enrolled in school in 2000. The baseball season doesn't start until 2001.
Okay.
So he had just finished, or he's getting ready to finish his last season in 2001 as I'm finishing my first season as a freshman.
Okay.
And so he doesn't actually become a hitting coach, because he transitioned hitting coach, manager. So it was like a 3-year transition there, really.
What'd you call him? Did you call him Dad? Did you call him Coach Gwynn? Did you call him T? What'd you call him?
I think I called him Dad. I called him Coach early because my biggest fear was, especially once he became a head coach, was that all of a sudden people were going to think I was on the field because he was the head coach. Now, granted, it was probably not that smart thinking, considering I'd been there for 2 years and put up some pretty good numbers. But nevertheless, I didn't want him to have to deal with none of that. So early on, I called him Coach. I always made sure I was doing what I was supposed to in practice. Even if that meant I had to bite my tongue doing something I didn't want to do, I did it because I didn't want him in that position. And I think by mid-season, I was calling him Dad, though.
How long do you think it took for your teammates, especially the freshmen, before they got over, this is Tony Gwynn who's coaching me, and I can get past that and this is just coach?
I think for my roommates it was easier because they had been around him so much more. You know, they had gone to the house for dinners and things of that nature. For them it was old hat. But I think for a lot of guys, I don't know if they ever got through it the first year. Maybe the older guys had a much easier time, but I don't know that the freshmen ever really got over it the first year.
Yeah. What are some of your just biggest, best memories of being at San Diego State, Dad's coaching, whether it's a road trip or whether it's something on the field or whether it's...
I remember our first game. His first managed game was at Arizona State. We're playing like Dustin Pedroia and Ethier. I mean, they had a squad. I remember that very well. I remember going to Miami that year. They had Braun. The places we went that year, it was like my dad came out. I don't think at that time he understood the college landscape. We were going after like some of the best teams in the country. We didn't necessarily fare that well. Wasn't our better team. Actually, that year though, I got hot at the very end, and just having him around when I was swinging the bat that good, I mean, I ran it all. I think I got all the way up to 370 my junior year, and just the slow process to get there and having him there with me was nice.
I remember at one point, I don't know why I said this to him, I ran into him, and it was a year in which the team didn't do all that well. And just as like a joke, I was like, come on, Tony, when are we going to win? And he's like, I know, they're going to get rid of me. They're going to fire me. He's like, I got to win next year. I'm like, come on, man. Your name is on the stadium. Like they built the stadium because of you. Like, they're not going to get rid of you. But he, like, is that real?
It's real, man. Yeah. I mean, that's the same thing. I tell the story all the time about the Hall of Fame. Like, he truly believed until he got the phone call. He was unsure that he was going in. Now, that's despite every reporter he came across his last season telling him, well, come on, Tony, you can't possibly. You're shooing.
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't believe that. And I think when you watch the video of him getting the phone call and all that emotion, that is him genuinely believing that there's a chance it might not happen.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I remember him telling me was that he went after the best players, and he signed a bunch of them, but then they got drafted, and he kind of got devastated. The team gets decimated because
you don't have anybody.
Yeah. And what do you remember about just sort of how he was navigating that reality?
I remember it being tough for him. Even our first year, like, my dad wanted to treat us like men. Mm-hmm. But let's be honest, their college kids ain't necessarily men yet. They don't know how to conduct themselves. So I think he had to bring it. I mean, you saw as the coaching staff started to change, I think that's how he addressed it. And everything he realized he had to be a little bit tougher than he wanted to be in terms of that. So you saw that transition. You saw the recruiting style kind of change. Because he did. He went after the best guys, and he was getting them. But so was MLB.
And they pay more.
Major League Baseball was getting them, and they pay more. And as you know, the draft has changed a little bit now. So, you could wait it out until all the way up through the following year, and it was all good. Now, had he been a coach now, in this how the rules have changed, he might have better success going after those guys because there's a time frame that's got to be done in. So, but yeah, he had to. He knew there was an advantage to being Tony Gwynn, and he used it. But the consequences of that is you get those guys they sign. What do you got? You're decimated. You're taking more walk-ons now because you don't have time to go out and get those guys. So it was a learning curve for him for sure.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about just campus life at San Diego State. Feeling nostalgic because I went to the game the other day and parked across campus and walked by my freshman dorm. I think it's the only dorm that has not changed in almost 20-something years. And I lived at Olmeca. That's the only one that hasn't changed.
Yeah, El Conquistador is not El Conquistador. They changed that now, and it looks all nice. They got flat screen TVs in the lunchroom and everything.
It looks like the Taj Mahal. And I'm glad that the kids nowadays have nice things. Like, I'm not like I'm jealous,
right?
But like I'm glad that they have nice things.
No doubt.
What were your favorite non-baseball things to do as a college student?
I mean, shoot, like every other college student, I think weekends come, you like to have fun with your roommates and friends. I enjoyed that. One of the things I enjoy, I didn't enjoy it at the time, but I look back on it. The conditioning that we used to do, like I look back at that time, it was probably the best shape of my life, and I'm into fitness now. So I think back to like running along Montezuma and like That is like an insane run. I cannot believe, as I sit here at the age of 37, cannot believe I did that. Like, willingly did it. And it's like, I think back to that. I think about, because a lot of stuff was kind of new when I got there. Like that weight room that they have now that's, now 20 years, almost 20 years old, was brand spanking new. Like my freshman year, we were in like a little hut that we had a weight room. In the following year, we moved into this beautiful facility with like a 90-yard track in there, and it was like, this is legit. And you started to see the benefits of, my dad starting to come around, Steve Fish being there, and things just getting better. I was at the very infant stages of where San Diego State is now, and some of the restaurants, like you see, like it's no longer there, but 4.0 Deli was there. We used to kill that place.
They have a Trader Joe's on campus now.
Not only do they have a Trader Joe's, they have like a wings and they got like a whole
they got a
slew
juice
of stuff.
bar,
a juice bar,
and all of that. You can use like your card, your meal card that your parents.
It is remarkable. All the stuff they have. I haven't even been in the basketball facility has their own little spot. Like, what? Like, that's not even heard of. The soccer field has lights. They didn't have lights when I was here. It's come a long way, man.
It has. What was your favorite class?
I had a poli-sci class that I really enjoyed.
Okay.
I had a baseball class my freshman year, but that don't really count. But
Why made the poli-sci class so fun?
Because it was free thinking. It was debate. Anybody who knows me, like I enjoy a good debate, and I think that's the part that I enjoyed the most about it.
Yeah. Draft day. Let's talk about going up to the 2003 draft. The Padres have the 4th overall pick. You're projected to go maybe late first, second, the worst third round. Obviously, there's a lot of talk of the Padres going to take Tony's kid.
Right.
Were you hoping one way or the other that another team would take you, or that the Padres were? What was your mindset at the time?
I mean, listen, I think I had mixed emotions about it. Like, I knew that organization. They fit my criteria, right? They weren't very good. I was going to get a chance to possibly move through the system. But I'd also been here my entire life. So would it be nice to – and granted, I knew there was going to be a journey before I got there anyway. I looked at some of the minor league places, and I was like, look, I don't know any of these places anyway, so I might as well just get ready for it. So there was a part of me that was ready for it, but there was also a part of me that was kind of like, it would be nice to see what else is out there. And so I went through that process. As you said, it was late first I was hearing mid-first, anywhere from mid-first to third. And ultimately, I just remember my dad just kept telling me, ultimately, man, it doesn't matter. You don't make any real money until you get to the big leagues anyway. So the faster you can get on the field and do your thing, quicker you have a chance to get there. That's what he was really focused. He wasn't even thinking. He was trying to avoid the signing bonus conversation altogether. He knew it was inevitable, but he wanted me to focus. He didn't want me like playing around, holding out. Wherever you get drafted, you just need to go play. He kept saying that.
So draft day, set the scene. Who's there? Where are you at? It's not on TV back then.
No.
You're just watching the internet, I would guess, on a computer?
I'm at my mom and dad's house. It's just my mom because my dad's gone playing. Got my laptop open. And I'm following along, but I'm not really following along. Like, I truly didn't believe I was going to go in the first round, so I really didn't. I paid attention like 28 around there, because, the teams that were slotted in the late, there was not a need there. Well, at least I hadn't talked to none of those teams either, so I kind of knew that it wasn't going to be there. Now, that round went, and second round I started paying a lot more attention because I knew it was highly unlikely because I talked to Milwaukee the most. Obviously, my Uncle Chris, who was one of the lead scouts at that time for the Padres, was in my ear about it. So I knew going in that day. So we get past the first round. I get a call from my Uncle Chris, and he's like, we're taking you if you're there. We're going to take you right. I think it was 5th or 6th, something like around there. Or it was 4th. It was 4th. I'm like, all right. So, as I'm watching, Milwaukee comes up. I see my name go across. And I didn't really have a reaction. It was just like, okay, this no team fits the criteria. And then I started processing it. I didn't even put it together that Prince was on the field, on the team at the time. Not that we knew each other at all at that point, but didn't even put it together. I knew Ricky because we had been on the USA. At least I went to the tryout for the USA team. He was there. We kind of met then. But I was ready. Like, it was like, cool, let's make this happen.
How long from draft day until you report to the Beloit Snappers?
I reported like the first week of end of June. End of June. So it was about 2.5 weeks.
Okay. So yeah, your team was loaded. Prince Fielder, Ricky Weeks. Did you and Prince ever talk about both of our dads were in the major leagues, sharing stories back and forth, or was it just like this understanding of, kind of like a nod of
It wasn't really talked about our dads. It was more so the stuff we experienced while with our dads. You know what I'm saying? Like, we probably talked about being at the field and the players we got to grow up around more so than we talked about our dads. It's funny, it's how I even met Prince. I walk in that first day in Beloit. I don't know anybody, obviously. They send me to the manager, Don Money at the time, and Prince has happened to be in the office. Now, I think him and Don had some words the other day, and they were talking it out. And they were all cool because I walked in. It seemed like everybody was in a good place. I introduced myself to Don. Introduced himself to me. Then he introduces me to Prince, and Prince out of the blue goes, "You got a place to stay yet, man?" It's like, "Nah." He's like, "You want to stay with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I mean, it made sense. I was like, "All right, cool." And from there,
who was the sloppy roommate? Who was the neat freak?
It worked because we were both neat freaks. When we were single, we were both neat freaks for sure. Like, neither of us liked to be in a dirty place. Dishes were always done. If you did a dish, you did your own dish. Like, we kind of had the same interests, so it was an easy. Me and him were going to get along from the moment we met.
Yeah. So the Brewers back then, as you mentioned, were not good, but they had a lot of good players in the minor leagues. Could you feel the different places?
Not the first year, because remember, I'm going straight from San Diego State to Beloit, so no spring training. I don't get a chance to see none of these other dudes and who they are. All I know is the squad I was on was legit. I mean, there was some guys, Dennis Surfate, Manny Parra, Ricky, as you mentioned. I mean, this team was loaded. It was loaded. And I would end up realizing it only when I went to spring training for the first time. And the interesting thing is, you would think after watching my dad for 20 years, I would have known how to really prepare, like what it took to get ready for a spring training. I had no idea. No idea. It probably took me a few years before I figured out what I was supposed to be doing during the off season and how to get ready during an off season.
So how much, based on what you just said, I was going to ask you about 2004. They jumped you from low A to double A. That's your first year in pro ball, first full season of pro ball. That's one hell of a jump. Plus, double A was Huntsville. Southern League, ball doesn't carry. That is a pitcher's league.
The league was as good as it could get, too.
And at least statistically, it looked like it was a tough season.
Oh, my God. It was the toughest baseball season of my entire life at that point. I did not know how. I've never felt like this, never dealt with this. I mean, seeing a 2 in front of any number that I had with a bat in my hand was mind-blowing. And the at-bats, even though I was struggling, they ran me out there every day. I had like 600-something at-bats or plate appearances that year. But it was as hard as – and I was living by myself. Like, the apartment situation in Huntsville at that time, I mean, there wasn't no, like, 3 bedrooms anywhere, so, you had to double up. Prince and Ricky went together. I didn't know anybody else, so I got a place by myself. And then, man, living by yourself for the first time, I think I was 21. I was not ready for that.
Yeah.
Having roommates in college, having roommates everywhere other than other place I lived was my house where there was other people. So that was a rough season. I learned a lot, though. I really did.
The bus trips in that league are really hard, too, right?
Yeah, that first one to Jacksonville, man. the year before, let me quick story. Last trip of the season, Dayton is like really my first long bus ride. I got there lucky because they're all short ones. We're going to Dayton, Ohio. The air conditioner breaks. We open the center vent. Starts raining. So we're in there with no air conditioning. We're in just basically a zip-locked bus, basically. It was the most horrendous trip I've ever been on a bus. Yeah. But anyway, fast forward, Southern League, yes, traveling was horrible.
You go back to the Southern League.
Yes.
What changed the second year at Huntsville?
It started to click for me. I started to figure out who I was as a hitter, because that was the issue for me. Defense was easy. That was the thing that came most natural to me. I was gifted there, but what happened was I worked on some things with my father that year, just to try to simplify my swing, and it took a little bit, but once we got going the season, things started to click. I started hitting balls hard. I started to learn how to pull the ball for the first time. I never forget Frank Krembles the year before we were all struggling for a little bit. Now, Prince and Ricky figured it out like the last month and a half, but we were all pretty bad first half of the season. So he had us doing all kinds of weird stuff that I look back on now. There was a purpose behind it. Like, it's almost like you got to get somebody to exaggerate the exact opposite way you're going about it so that you can kind of get to some middle ground. And I think, for Prince, I remember he had me and Prince both literally chopping at the baseball. He was trying to get the loop out of our swing, and at that time, we didn't have all the technology we had now. That was a way to get a guy to do it, and it worked. Prince figured it out. I started to figure out the following year, and things started kind of taking off from there.
Was there ever a time? Look, like you said, you worked with your dad. Your dad's amazing. He knows your swing better than anyone. Was there ever a time that a hitting coach was there any friction that your dad's working on this and maybe a hitting coach has got some other idea?
My dad would never let it happen. He was very he thought about that a lot. Like, he wasn't going to step on anybody's toes. So our conversations were our conversations. I had to find a way, because I knew he knew what he was talking about, and so I had to find a way to whoever my hitting coach was that I had, take things that were different and see if they worked and applied to me, and figuring out a way to apply it to me. And that takes some learning how to do it. Eventually, I was able to learn how to do it, but it took a little bit of time. But no, he made sure that wasn't ever going to be the case.
I was looking at the different teams that you played for: Beloit, Huntsville, Nashville, and this is before Nashville's new beautiful ballpark. Talking about some of the oldest ballparks. Herschel Greer is nearly condemned.
The one place that would have been all right was the place they skipped us. Like, it was like in California. It would have been closed. They just said, nope, go on past that, because they were having problems, because that was at that time, and it's still the same way. They had that wind would blow out, and guys were coming with having boosted home run numbers, and in the same sense, where swings had taken a step back when they got to the next place they went to. So they just completely skipped Prince, myself, and Ricky all to that next level. So, yeah, I tell people I played in the by far the toughest minor league circuit in our own organization than anybody in the country at the time.
Yeah, the guitar scoreboard.
Black mold. There was all kinds of stuff going on in Nashville. That's why by the time I got to you guys in Albert, I was like, this is like a resort compared to the places I've been at.
Let's talk about your major league debut. How do you find out that you're going to the major leagues for the first time?
I missed the first call. Frank Krembles is calling my phone. Overslept. Or I just didn't hear the first one. I was asleep. I got up, calling back. He doesn't even try to play any games. Hey, man, get ready. You got to go to big leagues. I'm like, all right. So I wake my fiance up at the time, now my wife. I call my mom, call my dad, and they're pumped. So get on a plane, and I head to Arizona.
Play the Diamondbacks.
Yes, play the Diamondbacks.
What about your debut, do you remember?
I remember feeling like I couldn't feel my legs in the box. I'm facing Brendan Webb, who at the time was one of the best pitchers in the league. But I hit a missile to first base that Connor Jackson scooped up, stepped on first base, but I definitely remember it.
Your first
My dad, who hates flying, drove from San Diego to Arizona just to see one at bat, and then drove back.
drove back. Your first hit came a few days later. It was the exact same day as your dad got his first major league hit, 24 years apart. Both of them were doubles.
Yeah, both of them are doubles.
Baseball's just
it's crazy.
Right?
Kruko is up in the seats, or up and doing the game, and we'd see later on that there'd be a bunch of things that were connected in ways that are just different. But facing Brian Wilson before he was the closer, before he had the long beard,
yeah.
And that was cool. It was a boost of confidence. I swung the bat good my first time up.
Was there any sense of I'm vindicated, I made it?
No, at that point I knew I was going to make it. Like,
Okay.
After I got off to the start I got off to that year in AAA, the light just kind of went on. Like, I was surrounded by some good coaches, and they just had the right. Everything just started to fall into place. Like, I was getting stronger. I was more confident in my swing, things of that nature.
Let's talk about the 2007 baseball season. In particular, the final week of the season.
Yeah.
Your team, the Brewers, got eliminated. I think it was the Friday night of the final weekend. And the Padres are chasing a playoff berth. And they are one victory away from going to the playoffs. And they're in the ninth inning. They have a lead, and Trevor Hoffman's on the mound. He's got 2 outs. He's got a 1-run lead. There's 1 on, and you're at the plate. 1 out, and the Padres go to the playoffs. First, set the scene with your relationship with Trevor Hoffman as a kid.
Man, he was probably my go-to as a kid. He was there longest. You got to remember, like, I had a lot of go-tos there at the time, but he was the most consistent from 90 whenever till my dad retired. And we was tight. Like, Trevor, we were tight enough to where I remember a time being a rebellious 16-year-old high schooler coming in with a gray and black L.A. hat just because I liked the colors, And he was so mad. He made me take the hat off. He was pissed. Like, first time he ever really pissed at me. Like, we were that close. So, on the flip side of that, I also watch him pitch at more times than I could remember to count. So I had that advantage. Like, I didn't need to look at a scouting report. I 100% knew what he was going to do in that situation.
From what I've read, he was more nervous than you were in that situation.
If it sounds like it, right? That's
Yeah.
I've read the same things you have, and you got to remember.
Maybe not nervous, but maybe just like more. He was just
He was
weird.
aware of what. Yeah, he was. Here's the backdrop of that. That season, I had a shot to be the everyday guy. They ended up moving Billy Hall, who was a utility guy but played mainly third, who was a tremendous offensive player. They moved him to center with hopes that could kind of pacify what we had going on in the outfield. And so I didn't really get a shot. So I was that year was kind of an up and down year. I was trying to get over, being upset in my mind. And I was trying to salvage the year. I was hitting like 250-something in the at-bats I had, and I was just trying to – I wanted another hit. And Trevor was standing in the way of that hit. And, it was a cool moment. He had Lance Nix hit before me. He had thrown like 4 straight changeups. I'm like – I'm watching him as that at-bat unfolds. It's like he's going to go back – he's going to do something along those lines. Now, I didn't think he would – end up throwing, I think it was 8 straight changeups, eventually the last one I would get to. But I knew it was going to be a heavy changeup. I might get a heater in there somewhere. My plan was to stay on that heater, and if I got it, hit it hard somewhere.
And you did. Triple.
I got a changeup, and because I was thinking that way, even though I was fooled a little bit, I was able to keep it fair down the line, and I had a rough offseason that year in San Diego, I'll tell you that.
Game went extra innings. Brewers win it. Padres can still clinch the next day. They don't. They play game 163 against the Rockies. They lose that. They don't go to the playoffs.
No.
A few days before that game, you asked the then Padres owner John Morris something.
I asked him for a ride home. I asked him for a flight home. And
on his private plane.
On his private plane. Remember, this is the day before I actually get the hit. We had already settled this before the series started. So let's just say it was awkward going home. I tried to fall asleep as fast as I could.
You sit in the back. Do you remember?
I did.
You sat in the back and in the front?
I sat in the back away from Becky and John Moores at the time. I mean, it was awkward. Flying in, knowing that they had to go to Colorado now to try to win a one game. There couldn't have been anybody pulling harder for them than I was, though. Because I had to live. I had to live in Mission Beach that year, so I wanted to be happy.
And your family was really close with the Moores, right?
Yes. They brought they took a liking to my mom and dad early, and they were tight. They're still tight to this day.
Yeah. 2009. You're back at AAA with the Brewers. May 21st. How do you find out you're traded to the Padres?
My dad.
Your dad?
My dad. Listen, that year was rough because I came in the spring with a shoulder injury. They took me off the roster, so I was in AAA. Like I was I had to work to get back to the big leagues. Fortunately, Sandy Guerrero, who was the hitting coach at the time in Milwaukee, he got me right. It's probably the best I swung a bat that year. And we're in Portland, one of my favorite places. The irony is that I sat next to Will Venable's wife now, girlfriend at the time on the flight. I had no idea. We're just having a conversation about baseball. She said, "Oh yeah, you guys are going to face Portland." I was like, "Yeah." She's, my boyfriend plays there, blah, blah, blah. The very next day, I'm up at breakfast. I'm eating with Jason Bourgeois. We're sitting there having breakfast. Don Money is maybe a table to the right of us having breakfast with one of the coaches. And
by the way, were you eating at that famous breakfast place in Portland that everyone in the PCL still talks about?
No, this was a hotel, I believe.
Okay,
it was just a hotel.
Okay.
I didn't have time to get into the know. Funny, because I wanted to play in Portland. It was a turf field. The year before I went, my hamstring was messed up, so I didn't get a chance to go. So I was happy. Like, I'm getting ready to go to Portland. I felt like the time I did get to play there, I swung the bat well. So this is all good thoughts going into this. We're having breakfast. My phone rings. My dad's like, "You sitting down?" I was like, "Yeah." "What's going on?" He's like, and his voice got real high pitched. And it goes, "He was like, you've been traded to the Padres." And so I'm like, I've never been traded before. I don't know if he's supposed to be telling me this. If all kinds of things start going through my head. Can they go back on the deal because you're telling me this and I got to play it like I don't know? So I'm kind of nervous. And, so he finishes telling me this. He doesn't know all the details. You just know they traded for you today. Your Uncle Chris called and told me. So now I'm telling you. So we get off the phone. I was like, all right, Don's over here. I'll wait to hear from my coach and see what happens. Hang up the phone. Not within maybe 3 minutes, Don's phone rings. I think it's Gord Ash telling him, "Hey, we traded Tony. Have them pack up. It's got to be in San Diego." So he calls me over to his table, and I'm freaking out because I'm like, I got to pretend like I don't know. So I got to make sure I keep my face right, So he tells me, I pretend like, "Oh, really?" All right. So I pack my stuff. I get out. I'm on a flight. My wife's packing up the place in Nashville with our 2 children. I'm headed to San Diego.
And you played that night, right?
I pinch hit that night. I walk in the games in the second inning. So I'm introducing myself to Buddy and guys on the team as I walk in, and I end up getting a pinch hit off of no other than Brian Wilson. I walk,
score the game-winning run.
Scored a game-winning run. Yeah.
What do you recall about just the response of the crowd when they said now batting?
It was love. Yeah, it was love. I mean, from the moment I came on the on-deck circle, you got the people close. They're talking to you, telling how excited they are to have you. And then I came up, and yeah, it was a cool reception. And to be able to score the game-winning run the first night there, pretty cool.
Just how surreal was it at that point? Your dad's statue is out there in center field, and everywhere we walk around this hotel, there's someone wearing a Gwynn jersey.
Right. Right.
I just saw a couple of them before we started. And now here you are. Now you get to play in San Diego.
Yeah, no, it was super surreal. Seeing just being in a Padre uniform. Like, I grew up. I felt like this is a place I grew up. So, of course, it was surreal. Like, it took me a little bit to for it to be normal. Like, I was getting to the park like I was sleeping in my own bed, like in San Diego, like in my own place, driving to the yard. Like, I remember the drives with my father from home to the yard. So now I'm making that different, a little bit different drive, different direction, but I'm making that drive to the ballpark in my hometown. It took about a month and a half before it settled in. Like, okay, this is baseball again.
Any other just best memories of a play, of a game, of a moment of your 2 years with the Padres?
That 09 year, 10 wasn't a surprise to us because I think we finished second half of the season better than everybody. Like, we made the trade with Peeve. You had Clayton Richard come over. You had some pieces come over that were good. And Buddy is my all-time favorite manager. I mean, he just has a unique ability to keep positive but be able to coach you at the same time. And he's honest. So the 09, that year, 10, getting some Gold Glove votes as basically a fourth outfielder was pretty legit. We had a good team. We had good chemistry. Being around David Eckstein, Yorver Torrealba, we had Miguel Tejada being around those guys was legit. Like Mike Adams. I mean, I talk about that team a lot because we were good. I mean, the Giants, they ended up winning it, but we were beating up on them all season long.
Yeah. With all that said, when the time comes to the end of your time with the Padres, how emotional is that?
I don't know. I was bitter. I was definitely bitter, especially how it ended up unfolding, right? Because Kevin Towers brings me in. He gets fired in 10. Jed Hoyer takes over. I struggle. 10 was a tough year. That was in beginning of August of that year. I found out my dad has cancer. Like, it was just a rough year. But the crazy part was the part that made me bitter was I think it was maybe the very next year. Jed Hoyer's out. He's off to Chicago. And it was like, man, you didn't even stay there to make the rest of the decisions you were making at the time. But that's how it goes. But eventually, I got over it, and it actually fueled me the very next year, where I got to play for a team that I consider one of the most historic franchises in history of baseball, other than the Yankees.
Yeah, that's the Dodgers.
Yeah.
So I alluded to this earlier. The best part about this story is that people didn't even really know this happened until 2 years later, because this happened in 2011, and the video surfaced in 2013.
Right.
You're playing for the Dodgers. It's late in the game. You're in left field, and there's a heckler at Coors Field, and he's heckling you. And rather than turn around, you just reached your glove hand behind your back, near your butt, and every time that he talked, you moved your glove as if it's a mouth moving.
He was talking, you know what? So it just kind of lined up. And the backstory behind that is the day before Matt Kemp got thrown out by Barrett. And we came out the next day during BP, and he said something along the lines of, man, I can't be getting thrown out, man. I got to chill. I said, you know what, man, this is what we're going to do today. We're not going to respond to anybody or anything today other than teammates. So including fans. So no matter what, we ain't responding. But so the game starts, and this guy is just going on. By the second inning, he clearly was having too much fun. He was having way too much. So he's just wearing me out, and wearing me out for no reason. I'm actually having a pretty decent game that day. And at some point, they made a pitching change, and I remember walking over to him. I was like, this dude is really getting on my nerves. But I'm going to keep my word. So the whole time from that point on, I'm trying to figure out how can I get at him without acknowledging him. And I don't know how it came to me, but it came to me. It's like, this dude's talking a lot. I was like, you know what, that's the perfect thing. So now it was just a matter of me trying to line up him talking with my glove. Took me a little bit to get the rhythm of it, but once I got it, and then I think originally he thought everybody was laughing at me, but then I think as he started to talk more, I think it dawned on him that, oh, they're not laughing at him, they're laughing at me.
Yeah.
And you can hear it kind of quiet down as they let that play on. He kind of lets it go.
Yeah, the crowd turned on him, and they totally rallied around you.
You know, from that point on, every time I went to Colorado, somebody was there that night and let me know how cool it was every time.
Had you ever done anything similar to that at all to a heckler?
Nope. I mean, I was pretty good at talking trash.
Mm-hmm.
Like it started. I remember it started in college we were in UNLV, and these dudes in center field, it was a chain link fence. So they're back there. They got their lawn chairs, and they are just giving me the business. And so at that point, I was much more in tune with like having that type of dialect, and from that point on, it was like an art to me. Like I always admired guys like Gary Payton and things like that who could talk trash and get you out of your game. But of course, they're not playing, so it's just me just trying to one up you on whatever you're saying.
That's awesome. I love it. So you joined the Albuquerque Isotopes, the Dodgers AAA team, and got to spend the 2013 season with you. When you've spent as much time in the major leagues and you're back in the minor leagues, are you aware how like other people kind of looking at you? Okay, how's he going to react? Is he going to be the salty vet? You know what I mean? Do you like consciously think this is the way that I'm going to present myself to the people around?
Yeah, because when you get to AAA at a young age, you see all different variations of that attitude. And I just remember being there in 06, like 06 and maybe going back down in 07 as a 24-year-old. I'm thinking to myself, like, I hope I'm never this bitter. Like, I don't want to treat guys like this just because I'm here. Like, none of us are making the decision to be here. It's the organization has to make that decision. We got to abide by it. And I didn't want to ever be that guy.
I'm going to tell you my favorite story about you from that season. I don't want to embarrass you too much, but we're checking into a hotel. It was either Omaha or Memphis, and it was one of those, like, we get in, and it's just like everyone just bum rushes the front desk because they got the keys all out and the names all out, and everyone's like elbowing, jostling, let me get my key, let me get upstairs, because the 2 minutes it's going to take is the most important 2 minutes of my life. So as all the players are doing that, Tony Gwynn Jr. looks in, and he finds the key for the manager, Lorenzo Bundy, and he says, "Low," and hands the key to Lowe. And he finds Franklin Stubbs, the hitting coach, his key. And he makes sure that Stubby gets his room key. And then you got yours.
That's how I was raised, man. And to be honest, that's how I was raised in the game. Like, especially at that point, we didn't have like a super young team. Some of these dudes had been in AAA before. And sometimes you get jaded by being there. And you forget the I don't want to call them rules, but you forget the etiquette that is supposed to happen. A manager who sits in the front of the bus, probably, he's supposed to get his key first. And even if he doesn't get it first, like, he should be one of the first to get it. Same with your hitting coach. Same with, honestly, the medical staff. If they're not the ones who are also / travel travel secretary. That's just common courtesy. Like, former teammate of mine, Adam Heather used to say it all the time, hurrying up to wait. It's like the people who get off in the plane who are 30 rows back are rushing to the front. Those things bother me. So I'm going to always try to take care of the people who should be shown that respect.
My second favorite story of you from that year is I remember we were talking one time about, like, the best catches that you'd ever made in your career. And I asked if you'd ever robbed a home run. And you said no. And I said, do me a favor. If you ever do, don't play it cool. Like, show the ball so that I can call it correctly. And you did at the top of the hill. It was a day game.
Yep. I still have that photo. It was in the paper the following day. So somebody cut it out, sent it to me. Honestly, that's generally how all my plays went. I wasn't a dude that – I'd probably show more emotions on base paths, getting hits, that I did defensively. I genuinely felt like I needed to make most plays that were out there, and I felt like I did that for the most part.
The thing about Albuquerque that's different is that there's a hill in center field.
Yes.
What was your describe the evolution of your relationship with the hill in center field?
It was hate-love. It was hate-love. My first experience was actually my junior year at San Diego State, falling on that very same hill. So from that point on, like, I knew It'd be a while before I got back there after that junior season, but once I got back there, I was not going to lose to that hill ever again. Like, that was – I remember going out there the very first day I got there. Like, I'm taking fly balls on this hill. I'm going to learn how to run up this hill properly to make the play. And, you know, like everything, when it becomes your home stadium, you start to adapt to it. Now, if you're coming in as a visitor, you don't care how much work you get in those 3-4 days. You're not going to be ready for it in a game action.
My favorite part about visitors BP is the number of relief pitchers that stand at the top of the hill, and they just want someone to throw them the ball. They don't want to run up the hill to make a catch. They want to stand at the top. And
they want to pretend like it's level, and they just stand on the warning track and try to make the play.
Yeah.
Can't do it that way.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more baseball and your dad, but first I want to talk about your sister because she is a singer and a very good singer.
Yeah.
Where does the music gene come from in the Gwynn family?
My mom, my aunties, my grandmother, on my mom's side. They're the ones that I know who sang in the church and things of that nature. And I think my daughter is just gifted. What's up, Ryan? I'll holler at you a little bit. My sister was just blessed with a good voice. She, at a very young age, she wanted to do it. She was singing in church, singing at Qualcomm for national anthems.
Did she really?
Yeah. She did that a few times. She's just always been blessed with a very good voice.
So both you and your sister both work in industries where if you have a good day, people know, but if you have a bad day, people know.
No doubt.
How much have you been able to bond with your sister over pursuing something that's in the public spotlight?
I think she thinks of it much like I do. It's like, this is what we grew up in, so we don't really know any different, right? I think the spotlight was on us from the time we became, or we were mingling with society. The time we started school, spotlight was on us. How we conducted ourselves, what kind of students we were, what kind of competitors we were once we were in a sports environment. It's been secondary. It's been something that's kind of like I said, putting on your pants.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about when your dad was first diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
Describe some of your emotions as he gets the diagnosis and then it went away and then it came back and sort of the evolution of all that.
It's scary. I think in 2010, it's 9 years ago. It's not that far. We had learned a lot about cancer at that point. So you knew what the end result could be. And immediately, I don't care who you are, when you first find out somebody close to you has it, that's the first thing that crosses your mind is the expiration date that it has on it for most people. So that was that took a while for me to deal with. Like, literally from the time I found out, it wasn't maybe like 2 weeks later I break my hamate. So there was just a lot of downtime to think about it, and I never really got right until that off season, honestly. And then I was able to kind of deal with it. He's going through his treatments, he's feeling better. But going through that cycle, from 10 to 14, it was rough, man. It was real rough. Watching him go from the most jovial person, big smile, to his face just completely changing, being deformed almost because of the tumor. That was tough. Seeing him not in that happy mood was tough.
So it was lip cancer, and your dad dipped. How much remorse do you think he felt?
He felt a lot. I think he beat himself up about it because it was stuff that my mom had been on him for a long time about. And it wasn't that he didn't try to. It's an addiction, you know what I'm saying? So it's a little bit harder than, hey, man, you stop it, and you just stop. Like, it just doesn't work that way. And I think eventually that beat him up. I think he didn't – I don't know if he forgave himself for that.
You don't have to answer this, but how did you find out that he had passed on?
Oh, man. We flew into Atlanta. The Heat or Spurs had just beat the Pacers, I think, or beat the Heat. I had watched a game with Jimmy Rollins at a steakhouse. I was laying in bed. It was Atlanta time. It was 4 in the morning. And my mom's brother, Clay, called me and was like, as soon as I answered, I could hear his voice. I just knew it was happening. And immediately when I heard the words, I just went numb. Packed up, got to the airport. You know, it was early in the morning, so everybody was asleep. I had to let certain people Philly know, and they let the team know later on. Jimmy hit me up, like, as I was going. He's like, he offered to fly me home privately, and I was like, man, don't worry about it. I was just numb, and, like, I get to Phoenix, which was my first stop, and the news breaks on the TV, and that was tough. Like, seeing it up on ESPN in the airport probably was the toughest point of that day for me. Like, 'cause at that point, I was just numb, like, a lot of thoughts going through my head, and then I happen to peek my head over and I see him in his stance, and they breaking the news on ESPN. That was hard.
Would you, that day, were you like, I just want to sit in the corner so people don't see me and let me put a hat down? Do you conscious of, like, I don't want to be noticed right now?
I didn't want to be noticed, but I wasn't doing anything to hide from it. When I got on the plane to San Diego at that point, because it was like an hour and a half delay, I think one of the flight attendants recognized what was going on. Like, she saw my eyes. She saw how I was feeling. She could feel it, I think. I think she might have caught wind of what it was. She knew who I was. She didn't say anything, but she just kind of showed me to my seat, asked me if I need anything, and that was it. I was really thinking about my mom at that point, because I know how tight her and my dad were, and how much, she pretty much was. I was gone playing, so she was the one shouldering the load for a lot of this, getting him to the hospital through his treatments, and I was worried about her. I really was.
If I remember correctly, there was a private memorial on campus.
Yes.
And then there was the public one, right?
Yes.
What are some of the just like snapshots or moments that still resonate to this day?
There was a lot of people there. I mean, there were people that I didn't even know until later that were there. Like Barry Bonds was there. I mean, there was a lot of guys there. It was a good ceremony. My mom's brother did a fantastic job of changing the mood into some laughter, some stories about my dad. I just remember the outpour of people that were there for the private ceremony. By the time the public one came, I was already back in Philly. And to see the public memorial from a distance those type of things made it a little bit easier, helped get through the process, like seeing the love, because it didn't stop there. That literally went on, and it's still going on, really. People pull me aside all the time that may or may not have ever met my dad, but always want to talk about the impact he had on them, whether they had met him or whether it was just through him being him.
Yeah. I remember the day the news broke, the Isotopes had a day game, and I remember hearing it as I'm preparing, and I remember just going like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I'm not a member of the Gwynn family. I'm not going to pretend like that I know them more than I do, but like I said, man, he treated me like I was from the New York Times when I was a college student.
That's how you know the impact he had, was because anybody who came in contact with him, to a man or woman, all had the same feeling when they heard the news. Like the same gut feeling that you have, that's the same feeling everybody had, I think. That's how it's all been explained to me.
Yeah. And I remember at some point it was like late in the game and it was a blowout. So what do you do when it's late in the game? You talk about something else other than the game.
Right. You have to.
Right? Especially when you're doing 9 innings solo. And so it was around the 6th or 7th inning. And so, there's no out-of-town scoreboard when it's that. So you talk about what happened, and it's Tony. And I remember I had to go silent for like 30 seconds, or else I was going to start bawling on the air.
Right.
100%. So, at one point, the engineer might have even said, "Josh, are you still there?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm just trying to not
get
cry.
myself together."
I got 3 more innings to go. I'm trying
I can
not
relate.
to cry.
I can relate. I think my first. Remember, I'm in Philly. This is a place that booed Santa Claus. I go up, not playing well. I get my first day back. I walk up. I get a standing O. And it took every bone in my body and muscle in my face to not cry when I got to the plate. Like, it was overwhelming. And for that, I'll never forget. I'll never forget Philly. Philly will always have a special place because of how they handled that situation. I sucked. I really did at that point. I wasn't playing well, dealing with everything, because I knew at that point it was a build-up from like his birthday, May 9th, till that point. He took a downward spin, and so I was dealing with that. Clearly, I wasn't the type that used that type of emotion to be. I couldn't handle it. I was messed up about it. So to get that ovation was special.
How do you know that that's the end of your playing career and that I'm all right with this?
I mean, when you break your arm throwing a baseball. And the cold part is, I always thought it would end like that too. The cold part is I had started to really figure out what I needed to do to be consistent at the big league level. Was working with Joe Dillon, who was the hitting coach at that time. He had really kind of opened my mind to some different things. And at that point, you're more receptive, right? You've done the same thing over and over. It's insanity to keep doing that and expect a different result. So I got in that point, and I was positive I was getting ready to get called up at the end of the year. I started swinging the bat really well. We're in Rochester, New York. Feel the ball, throw it in. My arm feels terrible. And all I'm thinking about at this point is, okay, how can I get through this inning just so I can get in there and get it taped or something? And I got to the point where I was like, if they hit this ball to me, I cannot throw it. So I just had to pull myself out the game. It was like maybe the fifth to last game of the season. I go home, I have surgery, I have some screws and a plate put in there, and start the rehab process, and I'm just like, I don't know if I want to do this again. And from that point, and really, honestly, it started after my dad passed. Like, it became work to me. And it had never, I don't care what the work was, how much hitting I needed to do, how much work, I loved it. Once he passed, it started to become work, and I didn't want to cheat the game like that.
What are the other things that you did post-playing career before you started with the different broadcasting work that you do now?
I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I mean, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. It was really about the opportunity, if I was going to get the opportunity. And you never know. I did some auditions for Fox, didn't hear back. I had originally talked to Padres. At that point, they didn't seem to be interested. So I was getting ready to go try to play another year. And John Boggs, my agent, got a call from the Dodgers. And I was like, let's do it. I get to be close to the game. The Dodgers were great to me as a player, and now they're giving me another opportunity to start my second career. It was a perfect fit.
How natural of a transition was it for you? Like, once you got going, did it feel?
It was pretty natural.
Okay.
It was pretty natural. I always felt comfortable in front of a mic when I had to do interviews. It wasn't when I had to do television, and I've been doing it since I was
10 years old. Whatever it was.
So that it wasn't something that was foreign to me.
Yeah.
The technique of it was foreign. I had to kind of go to work on that. It's not always easy when a camera's in your face and you gotta adjust to the other camera shot too without being awkward. Like that stuff.
Yeah.
No, you don't think about when you're watching it, but it's not all that easy. It's not natural. So that part was a little bit difficult, but the actual transition was relatively easy.
Let me end with this. In what ways do you still hear your dad's voice, or do you still feel his presence?
Oh man, there's different ways almost every day. Like. Something will land on 19. Like it's almost eerie. Like as often as it happens. I know my dad's around. I have 4 children. I had 3 girls while my dad was here. I don't think I have a boy after a 4th try if he's here. It's almost like he kind of had the helping hand in that. I say things. Certain specific words that even when I hear it, I'm like, ooh, that's dead on. That's dead on him. So he's around in so many different ways. I'm reminded of him all the time.
Yeah. All right, Tony. This was awesome. This was amazing. You were very generous with your time. Thank you. This was awesome.
No problem. It's my pleasure, Josh.
That's Tony Gwynn Jr., and this is Life Around the Seams.